Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. So, what are we talking about today? Dying Light, currently ending on crowdfunding from GlassCannonPlugged. Big setup here in front of me. What do you need to know about the parkour-esque zombies dancing around Dead of Winter zombie side all smashed together, where height, risk, it all matters. Is it easy to get to the table? Is it harder to get to the table? What are the gameplay elements so that help you figure out whether or not this style of game is right for you, running away, completing objectives in scenarios? Let's go. So apparently this video just tells me more than anything else I need an overhead light. But what you've got going on here is you've got 3D elements of moving across, parkouring your way up, down, over, and around zombies through the use of buildings, little barriers that are going to get in the way as you traverse as well, and trying to complete objective-based scenarios that are slowly unlocking as your zombie siding meets Dead of Winter all rolled into one. Now, I have just a 4-grid basic setup going on here, and I have about 3 or 4 different elevations, as you can tell, and there's 3 different types of zombies on the board. I have my runners, which are your player characters that they're going to be traversing slowly across. There's one way up here in the front too, so we'll put them on top of this building for ease of access. And then what you're going to be doing is trying to, as you can see, there are a couple spaces on the board as well that have numbered positions. And these numbered positions are essentially your objectives as you're traversing across this map. And you're going to have a scenario-based system that is going to give you things that you may need to accomplish. May being the key word there. Now, I say this is a smash up of Zombie Side meets Dead of Winter in more of an overview aspect, but it takes a few twists that you may know from other dungeon crawlers, utilizes them, and puts their own unique, well, spin on them in the dice form in addition. And so what you're getting into here is a scenario-driven based zombie side, if you will. You are presented with these cards at the beginning of the game, and you are going to be slowly presented with a scenario that, well, tells you a little bit of the parameters. So at the beginning of this scenario, for example, I can't jump over this fence until I activate the 2 gates right here in spots 1. And so then it's going to unlock scenario card 2, which is going to unlock scenario card 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. And there's going to be a few branching points where you say, hey, if you go to 2 first versus if you go to 3, you may get the item, but, you know, there may be some consequences for you disturbing things in a different way, or how things are going to spawn, or what other, you know, sort of trouble you may run into along the way. And so that's where it's giving you not only a little bit of decision making, but really the video game-esque feel, if you're not familiar with that in the first place, of this is not zombie side though at the same time. This utilizes zombies and miniatures and the fact that you can fight them, but don't be confused. At least in the prototype scenario that we have right here, my main objective is not to fight. It's to survive. And again, slightly different twist on the surviving in the sense that I'm trying to make my way across as these literal hordes are just following you, because certain actions that you're going to be taking, you're moving, jumping, climbing, parkouring, as well as fighting, are going to attract them in the form of risk. And again, risk is rolled with dice. And why that matters is because the more risk, well, the more actions that the bad guys get, because as you're going on a day or night basis, and this is the very clever mechanic, you have these cards. And these cards correspond to, well, either the daytime or the nighttime. So the first 7 rounds or so, and then after 7. And how much risk you have will determine how many of these cards you flip over. And they're going to have individual actions for each individual character that's going to get activated for zombies on your turn. So you've got movement, and you can see nighttime, right? Oh, look at these ones. Daytime versus nighttime there. Completely different what and how much is going to get activated. And so as you go through the rest of these, you can start to see the additional, well, good luck. That has nothing on it. But again, advantage here, exposure. You can, again, have lots of different things. And so that's going to be the element of things, of how many of these you have to draw based on how risky your actions are, that you're going to be having to balance as you go along. Now, the other aspect I really need to dive into of that you're going to be mitigating is the clever spin on the dice. You're familiar with chucking your dice here. And what you start out with is potentially 5 and getting up to 6 dice. These white dice, well, I mean, the nice thing about dice, right, is that, well, they're actually very useful. Blank sides are not just blank sides in this game. Blank sides just means that you can use them. The sides that have the icons on them are additional bonus when you use them. And so how you use these and when you time these, because it has a little bit of an effect we've seen with other crawlers in the sense that you want to use them because they're your main actions, but if you don't use them, then you're going to be able to have them to defend yourself with or evade when these zombies will come at you. And believe me, when I say that these zombies are going to come at you, well, they're going to come at you and they're going to come in force. And so you're going to be having to deal with that in many different ways because the combat system is directly just based off of a numerical game. Zombies deal X damage. How much damage can you block? How many dice do you have to be able to block with in the first place? And so a couple of your dice you'll notice here are different colors, and those are going to correspond to your attack bonuses, and then your movement bonuses, and then momentum bonus, which is another tricky thing. Because on your player board here, you're going to be allocating these dice to the slots as you play them. So you're going to put them across here. And if you ever reach that yellow spot with a die during your turn, well, next round, you get to have the yellow die if you keep up your momentum. And that's where the parkouring, the physical momentum, is thematically incorporated in this game, because then that's another die. It's a whole action. And all of the sides on this die have icons to benefit you and boost you. So you're dealing with those. Then you also have your asymmetric player character ability, your starting weapon, and then you have 4 custom slots up here for gear that also allows you to mitigate or gain boosts that are very similar to the dice in the first place, that you have basically 2, hits or 2 uses allowing you to mitigate in the die rolling aspect or the defense aspect or the evasion aspect, however you so choose. And you slowly gather those supplies as you're going along. There are upgraded epic weapons items that you can acquire. There are one-time use consumables. And so you're just kind of eking it out, dodging and diving wherever you can, trying to use the elevation to your advantage. But you'll notice that, as I said, these guys are going to come after you. And 2 of the zombies that are in this prototype will actually hop up on to the building to get next to you. The biters, well, they're the simple ones. They're the stupid ones, right? They can't do that. So if you're just surrounded by those and none of the other ones have spawned, well, fantastic. You're safe by climbing the building. But if they're the other ones, as they're going to spawn at the spawn points, you're going to run into other issues, and that's represented by some of these tokens that are on the ground in the first place, other environmental situations like the fire there, or the spawn token, or just various things along the way like the equipment that you will also be going and picking up. And so all of those things are combining. If you have actions, you have fatigue that you can use based on the little symbol down here, and that corresponds to moving one of your dice from the active area to the fatigued. And then if fatigue happens, then the next round you don't get it automatically back. Anything in this row I would get back, but then I'd move over here, which then get back the corresponding round later. You can upgrade the weapons as you're going along. So there's lots of ways that you can mitigate this, propagate, and just propel yourself forward. So again, it's a little bit of combination of all of that and using the dice to be clever, not just rolling the dice for pure numbers. The only time the pure number comes in is that zombie thing that I mentioned, because as I showed you here with the weapon, it just shows you how many red dice you're going to roll, and then you basically roll those dice, total up the number, and if it's higher than the zombie's hit points, well, you knock them out, which is fantastic. But you'll also notice that, some of these are 1s, and even the basic level biters have 4 health. So this die only goes up to 5. So again, this game emphasizes the defensive evasion and the running away rather than the slog 'em out zombie side that you're used to. And so if you play it like that, this game is going to fall flat. You're going to die and you're not going to get the enjoyment. But if zombie side isn't what you're looking for, it's just to slug them out, sit next to each other, try and take out as many as you can in as few actions as possible, and you want something with a more dynamic element of, tag, if you will, this is going to be what you're looking for. Now, again, we have to state that, putting this together, again, was no small labor of love. It's not overly complex, and I like the aesthetic value that this provides, because you really do have to take into account, jumping from one place to the other, because you can jump over these zones. If they're lower, you can actually skip over a complete zone on the map as a whole, because you'll notice these zones are divided up between solid lines and dotted lines. And so you're maneuvering between those and, trying to make your way through them. And you're taking risk if you're moving out of zones with zombies. So again, even the movement action is not going to be free as you're going along. But it's a little bit of a labor of love, like I mentioned, to put these together. I mean, it's not hard by any means. I'm an idiot took me a little bit longer, than I'd like to admit, to actually figure this out, because I mean, essentially you're putting these, 2 cubes together here like this, right? And you just slide one in like there, and it makes the nice 3D element terrain, and it really works kind of nicely there. And you just put it on the table here, boom, they show you where to go. But, it's going to be a little bit set up and teardown because they're not going to fit in this box, and then you're going to end up with ones that just are flattened like this, and you can just utilize them and then put them together. So how much of a big deal is that for you? Because this is a game that, unless you have a dedicated table for, it's probably going to be a little bit of a tear up. It's going to be a little bit of a setup teardown just from that aspect. Now, the scenario, again, is going to be fully dependent on how rushed you are. It really is a race. And so it takes away some of the, I'm just going to slowly crawl this, because if you do, the zombies, again, thematically speaking, are going to just continue coming, get closer to closer to you, and you're going to be overrun. So you have to be smart about how you're maneuvering, in the ways in which you're maneuvering up and down and around and over. And that's kind of a cool element. Like, I haven't really seen that done, anything in that aspect, more so on the crawl side of things. At the same time, because these zombies are going to spawn, it's not necessarily going to be as, keep away, if you will, than you may like. They're going to be able to get up there and chase you. I mean, the round structure is very straightforward here. Activate, expose, end. And activation actually comes in the form of an Aeon's End style card play, where you have player cards and you have zombie cards. And so they're going to activate, or you're going to activate, depending on who goes. And so you're just going to draw them one card at a time. Player goes, zombies go, player goes. And so then the exposure phase, where again, all the bad stuff and the nighttime or the daytime actions are going to be exposed based on how much risk you were drawing in the first place with these cards. And then you're going to have your end phase, which is your cleanup. And it kind of runs you through all of the actions that you can see here, right? None of them are terribly complicated. Move, climb, jump, attack, defend, and interact. Interacting is free. Attacking is easy. And moving, climbing, jumping are, again, probably, especially the climbing and jumping, are much more intuitive and not overly complicated on, well, if the terrain was present on a day ending in Y and there's an enemy next to you, you have to add the factor of Z combined with the numerical of 4. You know what I'm saying, though, right? Like, it's just not hard. It's not hard to figure out. Are you using dice and then adding an extra dice depending on like the level or depending on where you're going? Right? It's just very straightforward how many dice you're going to use. You'd calculate it out. It's very easy. I was very pleasantly surprised by that. I always worry about like things like that, like Madara or anything else with any sort of slight elevation where you, again, are trying to calculate that with the type of terrain that's under you. And it just becomes a little bit of a mental fatigue issue. And it's not from this side of things. Defending, again, is easy, but it's going to limit you. You kind of have to go high risk, high reward to get some places. Otherwise, with only the potential between, 5 and 6 dice available to you, not these two, obviously, but that's not going to give you a ton of movement, especially if I tell you that jumping from one area to the next is going to cost you 3 dice. So you're going to want to push it, but then you're going to have little to defend yourself with. So you're going to end up taking these wound cards. Wound cards are, well, light wounds. And then if you get damaged again, you flip the card over and you see what happens. And then that's what's going to, be potentially either a boon or a curse there. And this one, actually, brace up, immediately regain momentum. That's great, actually. But a lot of them are the exact opposite. So that's what you're going to have to deal with. Are you okay with that? Getting a certain number of wounds, you'll lose. So that's the game in a nutshell, right? Scenario driven. How many of these scenarios, they're going to be dynamically different depending on how you want, even with the same setup. So I don't worry about it much from that standpoint. But, this is 10 cards as well. So when they say a scenario, it's go to point A, go to point B, go to point C, go to A, go to C, go to B. How do you decide which branching narrative do you want to? Because you have S2, you have S2A, you have S2B, S3, but then maybe S4, if you do S3 doesn't become available and you skip to maybe 4B or you skip to 4C or you just skip to 5. So it's not going to be that long, but it is going to be a little bit longer with the setup and teardown than some of these others. At the same time, the setup is both a blessing and a curse. Aesthetically, it's probably easier than many other of its counterparts that are made of things like this, but it's still going to be a little bit of a chore if you're looking for something that's going to be super straightforward to get to the table. The nice thing is it's very well marked on the boards themselves where it goes and how these things are divided, so there's no issue from that standpoint. So pros and cons. I mean, pro, this is a step up. This is Parkour Zombicide. It is. And it's more emphasis heavy on the getting away, the evading, the cleverness of your dice mitigation and your dice management, rather than just how well can you roll, and do you get lucky, or do you have weapons that just allow you to roll a ton more, do a ton more damage. That is the minor aspect of this game. And I think that has to be applauded, because I went into this thinking it was going to be more of a combination. But if you do that, you're not going to get very far, and it's going to feel really crappy. Mostly because you're just going to fail, to be honest. But if you're looking for a game that rewards you for being a little bit clever, with still that level of more simplistic mechanics overall, it has that. Pro as well, I'm wagering that with all of the additional scenarios and content and other expansions that they're offering, I'd say there's going to be quite a variety of the underground, the above ground, the windmill. There's going to be some elements that you can do a lot of manipulation with the tokens, as well as the actual 3D physicality here, without too much, again, increased overhead, right? Because that's what I worry about nowadays too, with extra expansions, or what you're getting in the prototype versus what you're getting as a final copy. And I don't see that you can really overcomplicate this based on the system that they have, which, if you're like me and you have too many of these games, or if you're looking at this as another in your collection, that's going to make it a lot easier to come back to if you haven't played it in a couple days. Wink, wink, right? A couple days, a couple months. And so that's a real blessing as a whole. The downside is, if you're looking for something super strategic, if you're looking for just a more complex, it's just not enough zombie side as brain burning situation, this is not going to provide that either. This is not your Frosthaven, right? This is not your level of, oh, wow, this is really thinking 3 steps ahead. This is, okay, I'm going to roll stuff and I'm going to pull cards from a deck, and that's going to determine how many zombies, or if the zombies move, or what their location is going to be around me. And then I'm going to have to tactically base that, not only based off of when my turn is during the next activation phase, but also what happens if the zombies go in front of me during the activation phase next time as well, after we do the day or night phase. So how well you can do that, and how close or not the other objectives are, is really your mileage is going to vary. Again, another pro, like I said, I love the fact that these actions are really easy to understand. There's no problem from that aspect. There's no convoluted calculations. It's very straightforward, but it's going to leave you wanting, again, if you prefer a little bit of more of a mathematical, because you're still going into the combats, even if you have one of those epic upgraded weapons, with a chance of just swinging and missing, because you're only rolling 1 die, or the 2 dice that you roll are just not as, good that time. So it really is a last resort, which is a good thematic experience, but it's not going to be good because there's just going to be something you can do. And then obviously you can be swarmed, and right, high risk, high reward, if you have to do that as a last minute sort of ditch effort. I mean, the other slight pro here is, you have some asymmetry with the characters. They each get one little special ability, which are kind of nice. It's nothing, dramatic. It's just a slight twist on the upgrades that we have with the dice and the gear. And so the dice and the gear, again, another way to mitigate. I actually really like the fact, as well as a pro, that rolling these blank sides has absolutely literally no consequence in me being able to use them. That is such a relief, because I have always been a poor roller in my games, always. And so not to have to be like, oh, well, you got 3, bonuses and I got 2 blank sides, and oh, well, crap, I just can't do anything on my turn. Like, there's nothing worse in a game like this, especially when it's not simultaneous, that is, more frustrating than someone else being able to do a whole bunch of stuff and you not, even in a cooperative game setting. And so the fact that they've found a way to incorporate that and just make it also a boon if you get it and not a curse if you don't, was a very, very pleasant surprise. I was not expecting that when I first got it and first started playing it. So to have that as an element, I would love to see incorporated in more games going forward. The other question I have is, you can see most of the terrain is 1 level, 2 level. And so the real conundrum is, are you really going to have higher levels? Are you going to have some of that more dynamic? Because, you can jump from level to level, but there's not a whole lot that I'm having to jump up to in this case. I don't know why I'm using a zombie there. Not how I'm having to jump up to. So that's less of an issue but I could see if that's an incorporation in, say, like the windmill expansion or skyscrapers or whatever else they've got in store, that could be more of a dynamic element where you're really going to have to use the climb action more as, you know, a main mechanic rather than more relying on the jump between all of these buildings in the first place. The other slight thing I wish was different as well, like with the weapons, I just wish there was something else to do with them. Some other way than just, okay, rolling a die or two, taking a fatigue, taking, you know, whatever else. I just wish there was something slightly more to that. Again, not as a real criticism, but just something I would like to see, because, you know, if I'm backed in a corner, give me a flamethrower, right? Give me some other twist on it that allows me to exploit the area, exploit the environment, exploit something else. If you're going to give me these walls, hopefully give me a way to knock them down onto zombies or knock zombies into them, or just something along those lines that I just like to see additionally from other manipulable elements in the game, whether that's, again, gear or, you know, the dice, or upgrading those because you can upgrade the white ones into the colored ones that I didn't mention. And so just something along those lines. I like the fact also that the day-night stuff and even the wound card that I showed you isn't all just terrible. It makes it for like, okay, well, it's 1 out of 8 that it's a good wound card, but you don't know which one. And so you're always kind of hopeful. And that hopium with like the Dead of Winter even, right? When you get a good card, event card, instead of a bad one, that is what makes it exciting, because it's not always just doom and gloom. And so, again, I like that element of things. As another last point of just concern, right? Like I mentioned that this is 10 cards. And so you don't go through necessarily all of them. You can't. It won't let you. But I could also see that if all of your scenarios are this long, part of the joy of this game, or Zombicide, right, sometimes, is that it's short. It's a short one-off. Scenarios, awesome. I mean, that's the big criticism. The pendulum swinging all the way back the other way now in campaign games. People saying, I don't want all of these to be campaign games, right? Give me scenarios. Well, this scenario may be longer than, you know, a couple campaign sessions. And so, you know, you're going to get your money's worth in terms of the setup teardown with these cards. But with this much going on, even if some of these are quick, this could, you know, potentially, if it's too long, make it overcomplicated. But that's the, you know, balancing act I can see being the trickiest point in this game, because otherwise, if they don't make it this long with this many potentially, then you're not going to have a chance to upgrade some of those dice, get your momentum dice, grab your gear that's going to allow you to mitigate more, or, you know, get the weapons that may behoove you when you're trapped in that corner, or exploring all of this grid, because that's really where the best part of it comes from. And so part of me wants this to be much bigger and even more spread out, so that there's more chance to do the cool parkouring across, you know, in the first place. Part of me already goes, wow, this is already, you know, going to be a table hog if it's anything more than 4 grids on the table in the first place, because you can't really tell necessarily, but this is a 3 foot by 3 foot table. And it's using probably what, like 2 feet by 2 feet, because each of these tiles is about 1 foot by 1 foot. So if you get much bigger, like, it's not going to be sustainable on a lot of people's tables in the first place. And so that would be the other dynamic concern. As cool as that would be to have like a full 3x3 layout, like your Marvel Crisis Protocols or whatever those elements, because that's exactly what games like that should be using in the first place with this. So all in all, again, you know, that's who this is for. This is for somebody who's looking at Cthulhu, looking at Zombicide, looking at those elements and saying, it's not enough for me, and I want to get away from the smash and bash, and I want to have some more control, but, you know, I still like the die element of things to make me feel both a little bit random as well as a little bit clever. And that's, again, probably the biggest thing I can say about the dice. I love the dice mechanism of utilizing those as actions and not being, again, hamstrung by bad rolls in the first place. That's just refreshing. And I was very, very pleased by that. But if you're looking for something heavier, if you're looking for a smash 'em up, if you're looking for something that takes a few of those combat dice-driven elements out of it, I mean, this is an easy pass. Easy pass. If you're looking for campaign, obviously, you know, you're looking in the wrong place. But again, if you're looking for these shorter scenarios or these self-contained scenarios where you know right from the get-go what you're going to be doing, that's also going to be a pass, because these scenarios, you know, they're designed with this, you know, amount of cards to make you stay on your feet, to go from one end to the other, to achieve multiple things that you just don't have laid out in front of you. And again, how frustrating or not is that going to be for you as a whole? So again, it's not also going to be inexpensive. You're going to pay for miniatures. You're going to pay for the 3D terrain. And so setup, teardown, not insignificant. Miniatures are fine. Terrain, like I mentioned, is actually really pretty good. But it's going to be, again, something, you know, like when I'm going to tear this down after this video, it's going to take me probably 10 minutes to tear this down. Not like super complicated, but enough that I'm going to be careful. I'm going to have to separate it out. I'm going to have to make sure. Setup's probably even more than that. And so, you know, I probably over exaggerating there. It's going to take me like 5 minutes. But again, how big of a deal is that for you of setting up, tearing down this every single time? So again, just food for thought, the quality of life concerns as a whole. So there you go. Thank you, Glass Cannon Unplugged, allowing me to talk about it, play it, and talk to you guys about it to help you figure out whether or not this is right for you. So if it is, go check it out. Crowdfunding is ending very shortly. And if it's not, that's okay. You know what? Go get one of the other games or something else that suits you best, right? What is best for you more than anything else? Stay classy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want somehow. You made it this far and crappy video and light all funny. Again, like that just shows me I need a bigger light overhead. I have a Patreon for that if you want to. Anyway, I'm done. Peace out. See you around. But don't be confused. Just script to 5.